Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight, we step into a world of velvet, vermin, and very questionable smells. We're heading straight into the glittering, grimy court of Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen of England. With her towering ruffs, powdered face, and dazzling wit, she commands attention. But don't get too close. Behind the regal grandeur lies a daily reality that's less fairy tale and more festering nightmare. And if you're sensitive to scent, well, they probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is. So, drop that in the comments too. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's the late 1500s, and England is rising from medieval shadows into the bold light of the Renaissance. The Protestant Reformation is still echoing through churches and taverns. Across the Channel, Catholic Spain eyes England like a vulture watching a wounded deer. But in London, at the very heart of the action, stands Elizabeth Tudor, regal, radiant, and reigning with fierce independence. She's the monarch of myth, the woman whose image has been burnished into history with portraits, poetry, and plays. But tonight, we aren't gazing at her through a golden frame. We're sneaking behind the tapestries, into her chambers, past the centuries, past the sweet smell of roses. Wait, no, that's not roses. That's something else entirely. Elizabeth's court is, by all appearances, a dream. But the air tells a different story. It's thick, dense. The scent of bodies, breath, unwashed fabric, dried herbs, and animal fat candles swirls together in a uniquely Tudor bouquet. This is not a place for the faint-nosed. The royal apartments in Whitehall Palace glitter with candlelight bouncing off gold leaf ceilings. Tapestries hang thick on the walls, not for decoration, but insulation. There's no central heating after all, and England gets damp. Beneath her feet, rushes cover the floor, layered with dried flowers and herbs, lavender, mint, marjoram, intended to mask the stench of spoiled food, bodily waste, and something distinctly rodent-like. These rushes aren't cleaned often, just replaced sometimes. Maybe in this fragrant fog steps Elizabeth, the carefully choreographed center of attention. Her white makeup glows in the low light, thickly applied over skin that has seen little water in months. A finely embroidered gown cascades from her shoulders. But if you dared to press your nose to the fabric, you'd likely regret it. That dress has soaked up years of sweat, perfume, and who knows what from the Tudor, but we'll get to her wardrobe disasters later. For now, we focus on the Queen's presence. Regal and commanding, yes, but beneath that facade, an unavoidable truth. She stinks, and so does everyone else. Elizabeth's hygiene practices or lack thereof were not particularly shocking by the standards of her time. In fact, she may have been considered fairly clean. In 16th century England, cleanliness did not mean daily showers or even weekly ones. It meant avoiding filth that might make you sick. And ironically, people thought water could cause illness by opening the pores and letting in bad airs. So bathing was approached cautiously, like someone might approach a rabid goose. Still, the Queen made a valiant attempt to smell good, or at least better. Her rooms were often filled with commanders, decorative balls filled with spices and resins like ambergris, musk, and civet. These weren't just for aesthetics. They were all factory armor. When she moved through her court, she trailed behind her a wake of intense fragrance, the 16th century equivalent of someone bathing in Chanel No. 5 to cover up the fact that they haven't showered in weeks. Visitors often commented on the Queen's radiance, her wit, her glittering wardrobe. Few mentioned her smell. That's probably because they were too polite or because they smelled just as bad. After all, the average noble might only bathe a handful of times per year. Elizabeth, by some accounts, bathed once a month, whether she needed it or not, which might sound like a joke, but was reportedly true. Even that rare luxury of bathing wasn't what we'd consider a real bath. No soap suds, no bubble baths, no eucalyptus-scented candles. Instead, she would soak in a wooden tub lined with linen filled, with hot water heated in copper pots. Sometimes herbs were added, but no actual soap was used. The bath water would be reused because why waste good hot water? And the linen lining helped protect her delicate skin from splinters and the wood's natural oils. A luxury, sure, but not exactly refreshing. The people closest to her weren't immune to this old actory onslaught. Her ladies-in-waiting, servants and doctors, especially the poor souls who helped apply her makeup or arrange her hair, had front-row seats to the Queen's scent. But again, context is everything. These were people who lived in a time where animal dung was a standard street decoration, and the Thames functioned as both a water source and a sewer. A little body odor didn't shock anyone. Yet, even in this grime-loving era, Elizabeth's regime stood out in its own pungent way. Her obsessive image management meant she masked the realities of her body with increasing desperation as she aged. The perfumes became heavier, the makeup thicker, the layers of clothing more elaborate. By the time she reached her 60s, she was a walking alactory fortress. One historians still debate whether it actually helped or just trapped everything inside. Here's a little fringe tidbit for you. Some accounts claim Elizabeth had her own personal centers, servants tasked specifically with preparing and managing her perfumes, not just for her body, but for her rooms, gloves, fans, even letters. Scent was power, and Elizabeth wielded it like a sword dipped in rose oil. Of course, it wasn't all glamour and musk. There were slips, rumors of foul breath, of yellowed fingers, of once gleaming gowns that began to crack with dried sweat and cosmetics. But she remained fiercely private. Mirrors were removed from her rooms late in life. Servants were sworn to silence. Portraits were strictly controlled. If the world ever caught a whiff of the real Elizabeth, it certainly wasn't from her own camp. And here's where it gets even murkier. Some modern historians argue that the Queen's hygiene wasn't significantly worse than anyone else's. They say that the obsession with her supposed filth is a modern projection, a result of comparing her world to ours. After all, she lived into her 70s, impressive by Tudor standards. She avoided major plagues. Her teeth, while horrifying by our standards, stayed mostly in her head. Could she really have been that unclean? Others counter, surviving isn't the same as thriving, and the length she went to avoid public vulnerability, like hiding illness or toothaches, suggest a woman very aware that any weakness, even a foul odor, could unravel her image. Let's not forget that Elizabeth was playing a high-stakes game. As an unmarried queen, her body wasn't just hers. It was a symbol, a political tool, an object of constant scrutiny. Every curl of her wig, every fold of her gown, every note of her perfume had to tell a story. The story of England, glorious, pure, divine, even if just out of frame. A rat skewered past a pot of lavender-scented water. She may reign in majesty, but when it comes to bathing, Elizabeth lives by the mantra, less is more, especially when it comes to water. In fact, she's got something of a reputation. It's not the kind you boast about at banquets, but it lingers, much like the scent she so carefully tries to disguise. Her Majesty is not a fan of baths, not regular ones anyway. At the heart of this peculiar practice lies a tude of fear older than the queen herself that water, particularly hot water, could kill you. A belief so strong, so stubborn, it survived well into the 17th century. People honestly thought that opening your pores with warm water allowed me miasma, poisonous airs, to sneak into your body and wreak havoc from within. Better to stay dry, maybe splash a little rose water on your face and hope your natural oils did the rest. Skin, after all, was thought to protect the soul. Strip it too often, and you might strip away your health, your beauty, even your very essence. Elizabeth's solution to this invisible threat scheduled bathing with a strong preference for the word occasionally. She's believed to have said, either directly or through hearsay, that she bathed once a month, whether she needed it or not. And while some scholars still debate the exact frequency, even once a month made her seem almost daring by contemporary standards. Picture it, a grand wooden tub hauled into her private chambers, lined with soft linen to protect royal skin. Water heated in kettles over fire, infused with herbs like thyme, sage, or rosemary to cleanse the humors. 2 or 3 ladies in waiting, scurrying about, carrying towels, folding clothes, possibly holding their breath. The queen steps in carefully with attendants shielding her from drafts, which were also thought to cause deadly illness. She lowers herself into the steaming bath and rests momentarily in what passes for cleanliness in her era. Then, as quickly as it began, the ritual ends. She's toweled off, dusted with powders, redressed, and perfumed like a roast pheasant about to be served. But water isn't the only thing Elizabeth avoids. Soap, in the way we know it today, is not part of her routine. Tudor era. Soaps are lye-based, strong and deeply drying, more likely to remove layers of skin than gently cleanse it. Instead, washing means wiping. Basins of water with cloths gently dabbed across hands, neck, or face. For serious dirt, a bit of ground pumice or vinegar might do the trick, but overall the goal is to freshen, not scrub. The idea of a long, luxurious soak with aromatic oils, that's Roman decadence, and quite possibly the road to ruin. Her courtiers follow suit, or rather, they don't suit, at least not in the way of frequent washing. Nobles may spend hours dressing and grooming, but rarely involve water in the process. Instead, they rely on scented gloves, floral sachets sewn into clothing, and scented oils rubbed behind ears and across the chest. Cleanliness to them means looking neat and smelling floral. If you can pass the sniff test at court without fainting, you're doing just fine. This perspective is hardly unique to England. Across Europe, bathing has fallen from grace. Public bathhouse, once bustling centers of social hygiene during the Middle Ages, have become suspect, associated with sin, disease, and immorality. Many were closed after the plague outbreaks of the 14th century. Others became dens of vice, more brothel and bathhouse. And so, the pendulum swung, where once people bathed communally and frequently, now they feared even touching water. Elizabeth, ever the pragmatist, likely balanced her desire to remain healthy with the need to maintain appearances, hence the monthly bath. But the aftercare was where she really shined. Layers upon layers of linen undergarments absorbed sweat and body oils. These were changed often, sometimes daily, earning linen a reputation as the true cleanser of the age. Changing one's shirt became synonymous with washing oneself. It was, in the Queen's view, safer and just as effective as any bath. Still, some cracks form in this logic, especially when illness strikes. One of the fringe accounts from Elizabeth's inner circle suggests that during times of stress or sickness, She might go even longer without bathing, believing that her body's strength would be weakened by cleansing. Imagine then the subtle panic among her attendants, already overpowered by musk and myrrh, now with added stress, sweat, and days-old pomander residue. A scent so complex it probably deserved its own sonnet. Yet somehow she maintains an aura of power and beauty. Perhaps it's the confidence. Perhaps it's the careful choreography of her appearances. Or perhaps it's that everyone around her smells just as medieval. The stink was democratic. And it wasn't just the people. The royal palaces themselves seemed to conspire against the idea of freshness. Whitehall, Greenwich, Hampton Court, each an architectural marvel, each severely lacking in drainage. Floors were layered with rushes to absorb spills, which also absorbed everything else. Imagine walking through a hall lined with year-old herbs, crushed underfoot by hundreds of courtiers in heavy boots. Dust, rodent droppings, bits of food, all mingling into what some modern archaeologists have described as organic flooring, an interior decorator's nightmare, a bacterium's paradise. Still, the queen perseveres. She holds her court with grace, conducts affairs of state, dances in velvet gowns, and dazzles foreign dignitaries. All the while, her skin rarely meets water. She becomes something of a legend, not just in policy or poetry, but in her presentation. That unmistakable white face, those painted lips, the towering wig, a mask, a shield, a fortress of fashion protecting the woman beneath. And it's that mask that starts to slip ever so slightly as the years go on. The physical cost of her aversion to bathing, her dependency on heavy cosmetics, and her obsession with privacy begins to show. Her skin beneath the lead-based cirrus becomes pocked and scarred. Her hair once or gives way to full wigs after a bout of illness, and stress causes dramatic hair loss. But still, she refuses to reveal vulnerability. Still, she clings to the monthly routine, the perfumes, the powder, the carefully selected linen. Because for Elizabeth, cleanliness isn't about being clean. It's about being seen, about being the body politic. A woman who becomes more myth than monarch with each passing year. And if the price of that myth is a bath only every 30 days or so, well, she's willing to pay it. To the modern mind, her habits might seem horrifying, but to her subjects, she was divine, a walking miracle. And miracles don't need to wash. From beneath her gilded crown and carefully pinned curls, Elizabeth I carries a secret that not even her most flattering portraits dare to whisper. Beneath those elaborate wigs, beneath the carefully arranged curls of red gold hair that glow in torchlight and candle flame, lies a scalp that tells a very different story. It is a world teeming with tiny, unwelcome guests. The kind of company that makes even the most stoic historian twitch. Yes, lice, or to be polite, head inhabitants, as some Elizabethan euphemisms might suggest. For while Elizabeth herself is famously meticulous about her image, there is one battlefield she cannot quite conquer. Her own scalp. Hair hygiene in the 16th century is frankly a losing war for almost everyone. Wigs are not simply a fashion statement. They're a practical necessity. The average Tudor head is a paradise for lice nits and fleas. These creatures aren't just nuisances. They are full-time residents. Nobles, commoners, even royalty all scratch beneath their hats and hoods. Combs are used, yes, but often not enough. And shampoo, that's not a thing. Oils and powders help some, but mostly hair is left alone or hidden under layers. So Elizabeth, determined to remain untouchable and divine, embraces the wig with the zeal of someone who knows what's at stake. Her natural hair, once a lively reddish hue inherited from her father, Henry VIII, begins to thin early. Whether from stress, illness, or overuse of cosmetics, it fades from sight, in its place. Finely crafted wigs curled and colored to perfection, dusted lightly with fragrant powder, and kept in immaculate rows in her private chambers. Her wig makers, possibly among the most trusted of her inner circle, are tasked with ensuring that no strand is out of place. And yet, even wigs have their own set of problems. The heat under them, the sweat, the inability to properly clean the scalp underneath, the occasional intrusion of live, wriggling company. Attendants occasionally find themselves discreetly combing the queen's head, delicately removing any small white specks, a task requiring discretion, a steady hand, and a nose for not asking too many questions. 'Cause let's be honest, lice don't care about titles. They find warmth, darkness, and the security of an unwashed scalp to be more than enough reason to settle in. Elizabeth's obsession with cleanliness, at least in the visual sense, doesn't translate to modern standards of sanitation, and that means the tiny tenants thrive. Occasionally, she'll use vinegar or herbal oils, perhaps rosemary or pennyroyal, as lice deterrents. These concoctions sting and smell strong, but they are the best the has to offer. Some physicians even suggest mercury as a lice remedy, which, as we'll later see, becomes a recurring theme in her skincare regimen, much to the detriment of her health. Fringe anecdotes are bound of Elizabeth scratching beneath her ornate ruffs during council meetings or demanding stronger perfumes in summer months. Perhaps a hint that her powdered headwear isn't foolproof. Court whispers, carefully phrased and passed from servant to servant, mention combings that reveal more than just dust. Yet, as with everything in Elizabeth's life, image takes precedence. Portraits of her from every decade show the same thick, flaming curls. Artists are instructed to maintain the illusion. In fact, she famously decrees that no painter may portray her without official approval, ensuring that even as her real hair disappears, her symbolic hair, the hair of Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, remains ageless. The Queen's court, meanwhile, follows her lead. Wigs and false hair become all the rage. Nobles pile curls upon curls, sometimes using animal hair mixed with human strands. This too is a veritable zoo of parasites, lice, mites, and even the occasional flea ride along on elaborate headdresses hidden behind peacock feathers and pearl pins. Hair becomes less about function and more about fortress building. If your scalp itches, you scratch in private and smile in public. One particularly popular item of the time is the ear iron, a thin rod used to scratch beneath wigs and headpieces without removing them. Picture a dignified noble, discreetly slipping one behind a ruff at the banquet table, casually reaching the unreachable. It's etiquette meets infestation, Tudor style. It gets weirder. Among fringe treatments for lice infestations, some recipes include crushed herbs mixed with animal fats, spread thickly across the scalp overnight, and then combed out. Others suggest wearing a linen cap soaked in vinegar while sleeping. Did Elizabeth try these? Possibly. She was nothing if not experimental when it came to preserving her carefully managed image. But any discomfort was surely hidden behind layers of pearls, confidence, and diplomacy. The scholars still argue. Did Elizabeth truly suffer more than her peers from lice? Or was she simply more visible? Was her dependence on wigs a matter of vanity, or an unfortunate necessity driven by parasites and illness? Some suggest her early hair loss was a result of childhood illnesses like smallpox or typhus. Others blame lead poisoning from her infamous cosmetics. Still, others whisper about stress. After all, being the unmarried ruler of a kingdom full of religious fanatics, scheming nobles, and jealous suitors can't be easy on the follicles. Regardless of the cause, the result is the same. The real Elizabeth disappears under wigs and paint layer by layer until what remains is something more simple than person. Her hair, like her reign, is constructed and maintained with ruthless attention to detail. And just like her policies, it hides a tumultuous reality beneath a polished exterior. And so the Queen goes about her duties, inspecting troops, entertaining ambassadors, dancing at masques, with her head held high, quite literally. Her wigs are tall, her posture precise, but under all the glitz and gold lies the silent truth of Tudor hygiene. Even queens get lice. They just hide it better than most. It's worth noting that Elizabeth's hair troubles do not prevent her from using it strategically. She commisses paintings that highlight her golden curls as symbols of eternal youth. She grants locks of her hair to favorites as tokens of affection. A deeply intimate gesture considering how scarce and precious those strands may have been. These gifts become treasured relics encased in lockets and ring bezels passed down for generations. Imagine that. A tiny memento of royal hair, perhaps housing a few microscopic friends along with it. Yet even these tokens feed the legend. Elizabeth remains untouchable, unblemished, unbowed. Her court sees the wig, not the woman. Her people see the icon, not the irritation. Of course, it wasn't just her head that was a battleground. The lice didn't restrict themselves to royal scalps. Body lice were common, burrowing into seams of undergarments, nesting in the folds of heavy gowns. Elizabeth again relies on linen. Multiple layers change frequently to try to create a barrier. Her laundry staff works overtime, boiling her linen smoker and lye, scrubbing until the cloth is nearly threadbare. And still, the tiny invaders return. Because in the end, this isn't just a story about one queen's struggle with headbugs. It's a story of an entire era battling nature with powders, perfumes, and layers of illusion. It's about how even the most powerful woman in the world had to share her crown with creatures no bigger than a sesame seed. But she doesn't flinch. She doesn't falter. She simply adds another pin, another pearl, another puff of lavender powder, and carries on. The glittering gowns and towering wigs of Elizabeth might distract the untrained eye, but a closer look, say one brave enough to peer past the Queen's painted lips, reveals a battlefield far less glamorous. A glance into her mouth, had anyone dared, would have shown a terrain pocked with decay, streaked with darkened enamel, and haunted by the steady toll of sugar. Elizabeth's dental misfortunes are legendary, and like much of her personal hygiene, they reflect both the peculiar standards of the Tudor age and the relentless demands of maintaining royal image. While her skin is powdered, her hair replaced, and her scent weaponized with perfumes, her teeth are a more stubborn foe. There's only so much even a queen can do when rot sets in, that the heart of it all is a simple, seemingly innocent vice: sugar. The sweet substance pours into England in barrels from Caribbean plantations and Portuguese traders. By Elizabeth's reign, sugar has transformed from exotic rarity to status symbol. The wealthy, especially the royals, consume it with unrestrained delight, and Elizabeth, with her famously indulgent palate, is no exception. She loves candied fruits, sugar sculptures, marzipan creations, and something called sucket, a syrupy preserve of fruit soaked in sugar syrup. During banquets, sugar becomes centerpiece, delicacy, and disguise. It's sculpted into edible flowers, buildings, and even portraits, and she eats it all. The results are predictable. By middle age, Elizabeth's teeth begin to betray her. They turn black. Some loosen, others disappear entirely. Chronic pain creeps in. It's said that her breath, once sweetened by rosewater rinses, grows foul. Her courtiers grow increasingly skilled at flattery that avoids eye contact with her mouth. Contemporary observers note the queen's dental decline with a mixture of awe and horror. One famously recorded that Her Majesty's teeth are black, a defect the English seem to take little notice of. Whether this was a cultural blind spot or a polite dodge, it's hard to say, but it's true that dental decay was widespread, even among the nobility. Clean white teeth were not yet a standard of beauty. In fact, blackened teeth were sometimes considered fashionable, a subtle sign that one could afford sugar. Still, Elizabeth's condition was extreme. To manage the situation, the Queen turns to early dental remedies, many of which sound more like dares than treatments. Her most consistent method of care involves a mixture of crushed pumice, burnt rosemary, and honey, a paste rubbed on with cloth, or occasionally a toothpick carved from silver or bone. Toothbrushes, as we know them, won't become popular until the 18th century, so she scrubs gently and only occasionally, careful not to dislodge any already wobbly enamel. There's even a rumor, never fully confirmed, that one of Elizabeth's doctors had to strap her to a chair in order to extract a rotten tooth. So great was her pain and so deep her fear. The story goes that a bishop, in an act of loyalty or madness, had one of his own teeth pulled first to reassure her. Whether true or apocryphal, it captures something essential about Elizabeth, her stubbornness. She endured the pain for years, hiding it as best she could, retreating from public meals, favoring soft foods, speaking carefully. As the rot advances, she leans harder on rosewater. This fragrant rinse, part dental cleanser, part perfume, is kept in decorative vials at her side. After meals, or when preparing for council, she dabs her lips and tongue with it. Some recipes also include vinegar, cloves, and mint meant to kill mouth odor and preserve dignity, but they only mask the decay. They don't cure it. In portraits, her teeth are conspicuously absent. Closed mouths, tight-lipped expressions, shadows painted just so. Elizabeth tightly controls which portraits are allowed, and those that escape her censorship are sometimes altered posthumously. One image in particular shows a smiling, radiant queen, but historians believe the smile was painted decades after her death, when rose-tinted nostalgia softened the truth. And it's not just aesthetics. Dental decay in Elizabeth's time carries far more than cosmetic consequences. Without antibiotics or antiseptics, a rotten tooth can lead to abscesses, infections, and even death. The medical knowledge of the time encourages dangerous interventions, lancing gums to release bad humors, rubbing teeth with mercury-laced ointments, even swallowing crushed coral as a kind of calcium supplement. All these treatments, administered in dimly lit rooms by men in stiff collars, offer little relief and great risk. Even within the royal household, dental care is viewed more as damage control than prevention. There are no court dentists, but there are physicians, barbers, and the occasional itinerant tooth puller who offers their services to staff and nobles. They travel with leather rolls of instruments, hooks, files, and pliers that resemble medieval torture, tools more than anything dental. If Elizabeth needed one, she'd likely summoned her most trusted physician and endured the ordeal in private, very private. As she grows older, she begins to eat less in public. Meals are held behind closed doors. She avoids hard food, preferring soft puddings, mashed vegetables, and soaked bread. Court banquets go on without her, or with her making only a brief appearance. At the height of her power, the Queen is increasingly withdrawn from the one thing everyone must do: eat. And still, she is admired. Poets write verses praising her breath, her beauty, her radiant smile. Foreign ambassadors bow and kiss her gloved hand, carefully avoiding the space just inches above it. Suitors, real and political, praise her charms without acknowledging the very human struggles beneath. Even her closest companions learn not to speak of her mouth, her reluctance to eat, or the quiet moments of discomfort when she winces at the wrong touch of a spoon. Some fringe accounts claim she used powdered pearls to whiten her teeth. Others suggest she dabbled with early dental prosthetics, false teeth made of ivory or bone fastened with wire. But these would have been highly experimental, painful, and largely ineffective. Most likely, she simply adapted, withdrew, tightened her lips, adjusted the angle of her head, spoke through clenched teeth. It's worth noting that Elizabeth's dental woes weren't unique. Her contemporaries, including many of her noblemen and ladies, suffered the same fate. Sugar, after all, was addictive, delicious, and ever more available. By the late 1500s, even the middle classes were beginning to indulge. England's collective smile was fading. Still, Elizabeth's case is extraordinary because of her visibility and the effort it took to maintain illusion. Imagine the pressure. Every painting, every speech, every marriage negotiation rested on her image. A blackened tooth, a bad breath, a visible WSX. These could unravel decades of diplomacy. In a world where queens were expected to embody perfection, she had no room for dental fragility. So she powered through, painting her lips, powdering her face, and surrounding herself with loyalists who understood that some things were never to be mentioned. And all the while, beneath it all, her teeth ached. But she was a queen, and queens don't flinch. Her face glows pale in the torchlight, unnaturally pale, spectral some might say, as if she's a figure from myth rather than flesh and blood. The skin is smooth, too smooth, the kind of smoothness that only comes from layers of paint, powders, and a cocktail of dangerous ingredients that modern dermatologists would sooner scream at than study. This is the face of Elizabeth the Fern, made up not merely for beauty, but as a political statement, a mask of control crafted from lead vinegar and ambition. It begins innocently enough. In her youth, Elizabeth has a naturally fair complexion. But then comes the smallpox. In 1562, the queen falls gravely ill, her survival uncertain for days. Against all odds, she recovers, but her face does not. Smallpox leaves behind pitted scars on her cheeks and temples. For a monarch whose image is inseparable from her authority, these blemishes present a problem. The solution? Cover them up thoroughly. And thus begins her lifelong love affair with Suze, a mixture of white lead and vinegar. Known even in her day to be unhealthy, but beloved for its striking results. Applied daily, Suze turns the skin an ethereal white. It hides discoloration, scars, and wrinkles. It also seeps into the pores, causes inflammation, and over time, slowly poisons the wearer. Lead builds in the body, attacking organs, muddling thoughts, and weakening the skin it initially perfects. Yet Elizabeth persists. To falter in her appearance is to risk unraveling the entire illusion of the Gloriana myth, the ageless, untouched, almost divine Queen of England. Her ritual begins each morning and can take hours. First, the base layer of cerus. Applied with a soft cloth or sponge, it forms a thick, ghostly canvas. Over that, she dusts a powder of crushed pearls for shimmer, perhaps ground alabaster for added brightness. Her cheeks are tinted with vermilion, a vibrant red derived from mercury sulfide. Mercury, another poison, but again, a poison with results. Her lips are outlined with coinal, a pigment made from crushed beetles imported from the Americas. Her eyes might receive a faint touch of coal, lead-based again, or soot. Her eyebrows, plucked to near nothing, are penciled in, sometimes with charcoal, sometimes with mouse fur glued into place. Yes, really. The result, a face that glows like moonlight in the candle it caught. Porcelain smooth, unblemished, timeless. A face meant not to charm, but to awe, and it works. Her courtiers write sonnets to her beauty. Foreign ambassadors marvel at her poise. The people, many of whom never glimpse her in person, whisper tales of her godlike elegance. Her portraits, carefully vetted and widely copied, reinforce the image. The Virgin Queen, radiant and regal. But up close, the illusion starts to crack, literally. Ceruse dries and flakes. Over time, it hardens, forming a brittle crust that must be reapplied and patched throughout the day. It settles into fine lines and creases, emphasizing what it seeks to hide. Removing it is worse. It requires vinegar, sometimes mixed with alum or eggshell powder. The mixture stings, peels, and strips away healthy skin along with the paint. And yet, Elizabeth repeats the process day after day, year after year. The toll becomes visible. Her skin thins, reens beneath the layers, wounds form. Historians debate whether her famously reclusive later years were driven by age, illness, or sheer desire to hide the worsening effects of her cosmetics, perhaps all three. Fringe accounts suggest sores beneath the makeup, raw patches that would not heal. Some speculate that her immune system, already strained by stress and age, suffered further from constant lead exposure. There's a strange irony here. The very concoction she uses to appear young hastens her aging. The lead breaks down collagen, creating wrinkles and sagging. The mercury attacks her nervous system, potentially affecting her memory, moods, and motor skills. Yet, she never abandons it, never once appears in public without her painted armor. Because in her world, appearance is not vanity, it is governance. Her painted face becomes a political weapon, just as potent as any sword or treaty. In a court where men plot, ambassadors scheme, and foreign powers salivate at the idea of a weak English throne, Elizabeth cannot afford to be seen as old or ill. Her makeup is both deception and defense. Her ladies-in-waiting, ever watchful, maintain her ritual with military precision. They learn to blend, to apply, to remove the toxic paste with minimal harm. They become artists of illusion, and they learn not to speak of what lies beneath. As her reign continues, Elizabeth's look becomes iconic. She doubles down on the aesthetic. The high lace ruffs that frame her face like a halo. The elaborate jewels that draw attention away from fine lines and sunken eyes. Everything about her presentation says power, even as the woman beneath grows increasingly frail. There are whispers, of course. Behind closed doors, some courtiers murmur about her health, her habits. One visiting diplomat writes that her face must be rebuilt each morning. Another notes the contrast between her public face and her private moments when the mask briefly slips. But these accounts are few and scattered. Most keep their observations to themselves if they value their positions. Still, historians today debate the extent of the damage. Was Elizabeth truly poisoned by her makeup? Did it shorten her life? Did it cloud her judgment? Some argue that lead poisoning symptoms, fatigue, tremors, mood swings, match what little we know of her final years. Others suggest her remarkable longevity, dying at age 69, proves she managed the risk. But even skeptics concede her devotion to dangerous cosmetics was unmatched. There's even a fringe theory, half history, half ghost story, that her final days saw her refusing to remove the makeup entirely, that the mask had become permanent, that the queen died not just wearing cirrus, but almost encased in it. her skin unable to breathe beneath years of toxic buildup. It's unlikely, but chilling nonetheless. And then there's the symbolism. Lead white faces had long been associated with nobility and detachment. In Japan, geishas used rice powder for similar reasons. In Europe, the paler the skin, the less likely you were to labor outdoors. For Elizabeth, whose virginity was national policy, the ghostly paler underscored her status as both above and apart, untouched by mortal concerns. Even her enemies acknowledged the power of her image. Catholic propagandists, desperate to undermine her, accused her of vanity, witchcraft, and worse. But they never denied her presence. Whether loved or loathed, she captivated. It's telling that after her death, when the mask was no longer needed, the reality beneath shocked those who saw her body. The vibrant queen was gone. In her place, a frail painted husk, a woman whose devotion to illusion had cost her dearly. Yet to the world she remained the radiant monarch of portraits. Her funeral effigy bore her youthful likeness, untouched by time or toxins. Her legacy, like her face, was carefully managed. And even now, centuries later, we remember the white face, the red lips, the distant gaze. We remember the woman who turned makeup into monarchy, a queen whose skin may have betrayed her, but whose legend never did. The gowns shimmer in torchlight, thick with gold thread, dripping with pearls, layered upon layered like the petals of some surreal satin-drenched flower. Elizabeth I stands resplendent, a vision of power, majesty, and divine right. But get too close, just a bit too close, and that vision reveals a darker truth. The dress, for all its glory, smells, not sharply like perfume or polish, but deeply like time. It smells of sweat and starch, of dust and enclosed spaces, of fabrics that have never met the cleansing touch of water. Because here's the dirty secret. Elizabeth's clothes, no matter how opulent, are almost never washed. In the 16th century, laundering fine garments is not just impractical, it's nearly impossible. The Queen's gowns are handcrafted masterpieces, some of them worth small fortunes, made of materials that warp, stretch, and fall apart when exposed to water. Velvet, brocade, silk, and cloth of gold do not respond kindly to soap. Their dyes run, their stitching loosens, and their structure suffers irreparable damage. In short, washing them would be tantamount to destroying them, so they aren't washed. Instead, Elizabeth's wardrobe is maintained through a system of brushing, airing, patching, and perfuming. Her dresses use stiff brushes to remove surface dust. They turn the garments inside out and beat them gently, or leave them to hang near open windows, careful not to let the sun fade the fabric. Herbs are sewn into the folds, lavender, thyme, or rose petals, to mask any stubborn odor. But these are surface treatments, cosmetic at best. The deeper scents, the ones born of long days in a crowded court and long nights under heavy bodices, remain. Each gown, once worn, is carefully stored in cedar chests or lined closets. Elizabeth owns hundreds. Some are so elaborately structured they can indeed stand up on their own. But their beauty is deceptive. The embroidery hides stains. The lace conceals wear. The stiffness masks the fact that the garment hasn't touched water in years, possibly decades. This isn't unique to Elizabeth. Nobility across Europe follow similar practices. Clothes are status symbols, and their care is an art form. The focus is on maintenance, not cleanliness. Linen undergarments, smokes, shifts, sheaths are worn beneath these majestic gowns to absorb sweat and body oils. These underlayers are washed regularly, boiled and scrubbed with harsh soaps. They act as a barrier between the body and the uncleanable garments above. Elizabeth, always mindful of image, changes her linen layers often, daily, sometimes multiple times a day. Her maids ensure her shifts are fresh, her sleeves unstained, her collars crisp. But the gowns themselves, those are sacred. To wash them would be to court disaster, and so the layers build. It's not uncommon for the queen to wear 5 or 6 layers at once, a shift, a corset, a farthingale to shape the skirt, a petticoat, an underskirt, an overgown, and then the outermost robe often weighing upwards of 20 pounds. All cinched, stitched, and arranged with the precision of a military campaign. Imagine the heat, the restriction, the sheer weight of it. In summer, the layers become suffocating. In winter, they trap warmth along with everything else. And all the while, the fabric soaks in the day's work. Nervous sweat during negotiations, perfume from ceremonial processions, crumbs from banquets, dust from court dances, and the occasional unfortunate smear from a rushed meal or misplaced inkwell. These garments are marvels, but they are also museums of scent. Historians have occasionally been lucky enough to examine surviving pieces of Elizabeth's wardrobe. The details are astonishing. Hand-stitched seams, hidden messages, personalized emblems. But what they never reveal is the electory history. That part has faded with time, though likely it took decades to dissipate. It's also worth noting that these gowns were rarely worn more than once for major events. Elizabeth had enough clothing to ensure a near-constant rotation, especially in her younger years. But as she aged, she grew more attached to certain favorite styles and pieces. Some fringe accounts suggest she had particular gowns she returned to often, ones she believed brought her luck or made her look more youthful. And so over time, these fed outfits grew increasingly personal. Imagine a gown worn a dozen times over a few months, never washed, layered over perfumed linen, brushed, but never cleaned. The scent wouldn't just be sweat. It would be her body chemistry, her diet, musky blend for evening audiences, and something distinctly medicinal smelling for times of illness. Some are stored in crystal flasks, others in pomanders, small ornate orbs filled with scented wax or herbs that dangle from belts or chains. These served not only as perfume, but also as protection. Tudor medicine held fast to the belief that bad air spread disease. Her nose filled with civet and myrrh was thought to be a safer one. And Elizabeth surrounds herself with scent on every level. Her gloves are soaked in scented oils before wearing. Her handkerchiefs are perfumed and her rooms are lined with bowls of dried petals, resins, and sweet-smelling wood chips. It said she favored orange blossom and jasmine above all, but also dabbled in stronger notes, cinnamon, clove, even vinegar infused with lavender for days when the court's collective aroma turned unbearable. Perfume becomes a form of court etiquette, a silent contest. Ladies and lords lay a scent upon scent, hoping to be noticed, not for reeking, but for radiating. The olfactory arms race leads to some unfortunate accidents. Over-perfumed courtiers fainting in crowded halls, handkerchiefs so heavily soaked they stain silks, gloves that make hands sticky for hours. Still, Elizabeth reigns supreme. She never underpays. But perfume, of course, has its limits. It can't cleanse. It can't truly remove odor. It only adds to the mix. And so, the queen, like many of her nobles, becomes a walking blend of powders, oils, sweat, and scent. A complex human incense stick. Some days she smells like roses, other days like rose water trying to smother the ghost of last week's chicken stew. This reliance on scent creates its own rituals. Before events, Elizabeth is carefully prepared by her ladies. Her skin is dusted with fragrant powders. Her gowns are brushed with sachets of herbs tucked inside. Her hair, or rather her wig, is refreshed with pomade or perfumed powder. Even her bedding is treated with dried lavender and orris root. The very air around her is curated. Some accounts from visiting diplomats hint at the overpowering nature of this scented aura. One Venetian ambassador, sensitive to strong smells, reported feeling overcome by the sweetness of the English court. Whether that was a compliment or a cry for help remains unclear. It's worth pausing on one ingredient in particular, ambergris. Found in the intestines of sperm whales and aged over time, it has a sweet marine-like aroma that serves as a fixative in perfume. It's absurdly expensive and highly priced. Elizabeth naturally adores it. One of her most treasured perfumes reportedly uses ambergris as its base. A single bottle would have cost more than a commoner's yearly wages. Another favorite is civet, extracted, let's just say delicately, from the glands of civet cats. The process is well intimate, but the scent it produces is musky, earthy, and long-lasting. It's used sparingly to ground the more floral notes in her fragrances. Today, we might cringe at the source. Back then, it was the height of sophistication. Fringe reports even suggest that Elizabeth had a scented wardrobe, gowns and cloaks sewn with sachets of perfume that released fragrance as she moved. These secret scented seams ensured that her mythos followed her, wafted really wherever she went. The symbolism of perfume is not lost on the Queen. In a time when physical cleanliness is suspect and often avoided, smelling good becomes a stand-in for virtue, purity, nobility. Elizabeth embraces this fully. Her scent is not just about hiding decay, it's about projecting power. No one ever remembers if the Virgin Queen had a blemish, but they remember the way her gloves smelled. And yet, as with all things Elizabethan, there's a darker undercurrent. Some of the ingredients used in her perfumes, like lead acetate, benzoin resin, or camphor, cause skin irritation, respiratory issues, even hallucinations in large doses. But that's the cost of court life. To be beautiful, to be clean in a world where actual cleanliness is elusive, requires risk. There's a grim anecdote, half legend, half plausible, of one court lady whose perfume was so heavily laced with mercury that she lost her sense of smell entirely. Another supposedly fainted after a day of wearing gloves soaked in spirit-based fragrance during a summer ball. These stories, while likely exaggerated, speak to the sheer potency of the Queen's scent economy. Scholars still debate how much of Elizabeth's perfume use was personal preference and how much was political strategy. Some argue she genuinely loved the scents, collecting them like treasures. Others suggest it was all calculated, a means to maintain her divine illusion amid an increasingly decaying court. One thing is certain, no one else in the palace smelled quite like her, and that perhaps was the point. In the grand halls of Whitehall, beneath vaded ceilings and amid glittering chandeliers, one seldom discussed reality lurks behind all that Renaissance splendor. Even queens need to relieve themselves. And while Elizabeth the Fernand's personal hygiene rituals are well-guarded secrets, the more basic human functions, those carried out with awkward urgency behind closed doors, paint an unfiltered picture of daily life in the Tudor court. It is a portrait that smells distinctly less of roses and much more of ammonia, damp linen, and occasionally something stronger. Let's start with the throne behind the throne, the close stool. Elizabeth, like all high-born individuals of her era, uses a close stool for her bodily needs. It is, in essence, a padded wooden chair with a chamber pot nestled beneath a hinged seat. For the Queen, this apparatus is no mere furniture. Her close stool is an object of craftsmanship, lined with velvet or embroidered silk, cushioned for comfort, and sometimes even perfumed. It's a mobile piece of the royal household carried discreetly by her personal attendants wherever she goes in case nature calls during court progresses or long hours in council. The lady-in-waiting assigned to manage this rather intimate aspect of the queen's life holds a special position. The groom of the stool. Despite the seemingly humiliating title, the role is one of immense trust. The groom handles not just physical cleanup, but also the maintenance of privacy, schedule, and subtle communication. Being this close to the queen physically and politically means hearing things no one else does, sometimes during the most undignified moments. More than once, groom of the stool evolves into advisor, confidant, and gatekeeper. In Elizabeth's case, several of her most trusted chamberlaids took turns in this duty, always with the utmost discretion. Now, while her stool is elegant and well attended, it's still at its core a container for waste, which then must go somewhere. Enter the unfortunate souls responsible for emptying it. Chamber pots, including those of the queen, are often dumped into cesspits, privy vaults, or if you're particularly bold, out the window. In fact, the phrase "gardle," a corrupted cry of regard low, was once the only warning pedestrians received before a bucket of human waste was flung into the street. Elizabeth's court naturally had more refined systems, sort of. Whitehall and the other royal residences feature a network of guardrobes, narrow vertical shafts, running down the sides of towers or behind walls where waste can be deposited via bench-like seats. The idea is simple. You sit, you do your business, and gravity takes care of the rest. Some of these shafts open into rivers, others into cesspits or dry mows, creating a heady aroma that never quite fades. Servants are assigned to clean them. Usually boys or older men past their prime, paid poorly and thanked rarely. It's said that Elizabeth preferred her own stool over these communal guardrobes, perhaps because of the odor, perhaps due to privacy. Still, even royal chambers weren't immune. Her palaces wrire in summer months as hot weather awakened every stagnant scent hiding in the tapestries and behind the walls. To mask this, the court turned to the usual tricks: dried herbs, perfumed coals, and the liberal use of incense. Sometimes fresh rushes were thrown down, not just on floors, but around guardrobe areas to absorb moisture and stench. Of course, even with all this effort, the smell persisted. Visitors often commented on it. One courtier, trying to be polite, described the royal halls as rich with the breath of so many gathered souls. That's poetic code for it stinks. And yet, this was normal. Toilets, as we know them, did not exist. Running water was rare, and indoor plumbing virtually non-existent. Elizabeth's chambers might include wash basins filled with scented water, but those were for rinsing hands and faces, not for flushing waste. This brings us to hand washing, or rather, the frequent absence of it. While Elizabeth herself maintained fairly regular hand-washing rituals, usually with rose water or vinegar-scented cloths, most of her court did not. Between banquets, dances, and hand-kissing ceremonies, hands passed germs like party favors. But in the 16th,